Lena pressed her umbrella tightly against the biting wind, her shoes splashing lightly in the puddles on the slick city street. The streetlights reflected in the rain-soaked asphalt, making the city look like it was lit by tiny stars. But Lena barely noticed. She was focused on the small taxi stand across the street, hoping the car she had booked would arrive soon. Each passing minute made her impatience grow, and a low murmur of frustration slipped through her lips. Her coat clung damply to her arms, and the drizzle had begun to soak the edges of her hair, but she barely cared. Tonight had been long, and all she wanted was to get home, sit in her warm apartment, and finally let the day's tension fall from her shoulders as she waited. Lena's mind drifted to the morning, back to the mundane office routine she had. Tried to escape the emails, the meetings, the constant hum of small talk. Today, it had felt heavier than usual. Something in the office air had made her tense, and she realized she hadn't had a proper conversation with anyone except for the brief exchange with the receptionist and a rushed greeting to her colleagues. Even lunch had been eaten in silence, and she had missed her usual small talk with her coworker, Julia. The city seemed to mirror her inner chaos. Gray, wet, and hurried. Suddenly, a shadow moved at the edge of her vision. Lena's head snapped to the side, and she froze. A figure approached quickly, moving through the rain with a purposeful stride. Her heart skipped an unexpected beat when she recognized him. Mr. Carter, her husband's boss, the man she had always seen only in formal settings. In office corridors and during company dinners, was walking straight toward her. His black coat flapped slightly in the wind, and his hair was dampened by the drizzle. He didn't seem at all fazed by the rain, moving as though he had an invisible shield protecting him from the storm. "Lena," he called, his voice cutting through the steady patter of rain. The sound made her knees feel suddenly weak. She hadn't expected to see him outside the office. Not here. Not like this. There was something in the tone, soft yet urgent, that made her step back instinctively. "May I talk to you for a moment?" Lena nodded, even though a flurry of thoughts swirled chaotically in her mind. Why was he here? Was it about her husband? Was something wrong at the office? Or was it something else entirely? Her pulse quickened, and she felt an unfamiliar flutter in her chest. A mix of curiosity and anxiety she couldn't name. They moved a few steps aside, away from the streetlights and the line of taxis waiting impatiently behind her. The city's sounds dimmed for a moment, leaving only the drizzle, the occasional honk of a car, and the faint hum of distant voices. Lena noticed the way Mr. Carter's eyes studied her face, with an intensity that made her heart race. There was no judgment, no reprimand, only a certain weight of interest she hadn't expected. "You look different tonight," he said quietly, almost like he was confessing something. His gaze lingered on her coat, her hair, her eyes, as if he were memorizing each detail. Lena felt a blush creep up her cheeks. She wanted to respond, to say something clever or polite, but her throat had suddenly gone dry. Words she had practiced in her mind evaporated. She tried to speak, but the rain seemed to carry her voice away. I was just waiting for a taxi," she managed, her voice barely audible over the drizzle. He gave a small, almost knowing smile. "I can see that. I didn't expect to run into you here." There was a pause, a brief silence where neither of them moved. The moment stretched, delicate and fragile, like the quiet before a storm breaks completely. Lena realized she was holding her breath. Something about the night, about the rain, about him standing so close, made time feel suspended. The taxi that Lena had been waiting for pulled up at last, its headlights cutting through the darkness like two bright eyes. The engine hummed and the door swung open. She glanced at Mr. Carter, unsure whether to enter the car or stay and continue this strange, tension-filled exchange. His gaze met hers, steady and unreadable, and for a moment neither of them moved. "I should go," Lena said finally, her voice tinged with disappointment and relief. She stepped toward the taxi, But before she could open the door, he spoke again, his tone low and almost hesitant. "Lena, there's something I need to say." Her hand froze on the handle of the taxi door. Her heart pounded louder now, a frantic drumbeat that matched the raindrops around them. "What? What is it?" she asked softly, unsure whether. She wanted to hear the answer. He stepped closer, just enough that she could feel the faint warmth radiating from him despite the cold rain. "It's hard to explain," he admitted, his voice almost breaking the rhythm of the night. "But seeing you here, like this, it reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. Something I didn't expect to feel again." Lena's mind spun. She had never seen this side of him, the human side, the vulnerable side. At work, he had always been distant, professional, precise. But here, in the rain, standing in the middle of the street, he was different. A hint of softness softened the usual rigid lines of his face, and she realized she was seeing him as more than just her husband's boss. She saw him as a person, with emotions she had never guessed he carried. The taxi driver honked, impatient, but polite, waiting for his fare. Lena turned back to the vehicle, torn between stepping inside and staying with him. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her chest, a mixture of fear, longing, and curiosity. Every instinct told her to get in the taxi and return to her safe, predictable life. But another part of her wanted to know more, wanted to hear what he had to say, wanted to understand the strange pull she felt toward him. Finally, she opened the taxi door and stepped inside. The warmth of the car wrapped around her like a soft blanket. But her thoughts stayed outside in the rain, where he still stood watching her. She glanced back once, and their eyes met. There was a flicker of something, recognition, perhaps, or unspoken understanding that left her breathless. The taxi began to move, splashing through puddles and weaving through the wet streets. Lena stared out the window, watching Mr. Carter disappear into the darkness, his figure fading until he was just another shadow among the city lights. But even as the city swallowed him, the memory of his presence lingered, heavy and insistent. Like a secret that refused to be forgotten, she tried to distract herself, forcing her mind to think of mundane things, her apartment, dinner plans, the tasks awaiting her tomorrow, but his words echoed in her head. "Something I didn't expect to feel again." What could he mean? The thought twisted in her chest, making it impossible to focus. The taxi turned a corner, and a gust of wind blew through the slightly cracked window. Lena shivered, not from the cold, but from the awareness of the fragile, unspoken connection that had passed between them. Her fingers traced the edge of her coat, as if holding on to something solid could anchor her racing thoughts. She realized, with a strange mixture of fear and excitement, that tonight had changed something. She didn't know what or how, but the city, the rain, the taxi, they were all witnesses to a moment that would linger in her mind far longer than she expected. As the taxi continued through the wet streets, Lena caught a glimpse of her reflection in the window. Her eyes were wide, her lips slightly parted, and there was a softness in her expression that hadn't been there before. She realized she had been caught off guard, completely unprepared for the intensity of the encounter. And yet, she didn't want it to end. She thought of Mr. Carter again, imagining him returning to his own home, perhaps thinking of her too, perhaps wondering if she had felt the same strange tension. The thought made her pulse quicken, and she felt a shiver run through her body, not from the rain, but from the possibility that something new, something unexpected, was beginning to stir by the time the taxi pulled up outside her apartment building. Lena was trembling slightly. She paid the driver quickly, leaving the city lights behind, and stepped onto the wet sidewalk. The rain had slowed, leaving only a faint mist hanging in the air. She walked slowly toward the door of her building, her mind still replaying the encounter, analyzing every word, every glance, every subtle movement. She reached her apartment and closed the door behind her, leaning against it for a long moment. The room was quiet, safe, familiar, but it felt different now. Inside, she was still thinking of him, still feeling the echo of something that had brushed against her heart in the rain. She realized that tonight was not just another ordinary snooze. Look at this. Look at this. And we all know I've been exploring that. And we all know I've been exploring that path. Inside, she was still thinking of him. We still feel like so still not seen with steel with feel with seals to come to seas see with seal with seas with seal with sea with seal with sea 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 with verkens can I can me to you out with to come up at keck up to get with feed a we to get it can we you to be we you get can you can it to reuse I see you to you said that a saki with cat to keep I keep fin will I guy you see you guy I if we are if you eat the can we got can we yeah I only if they guys you can with me there night. It had been a beginning, delicate and fragile, a whisper of change that neither of them could have anticipated. Lena sank onto the sofa, her umbrella dripping beside her, and allowed herself to finally breathe. The tension in her chest slowly eased, but the anticipation remained a quiet, insistent hum that told her the story was far from over. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or how she would face the next encounter. But she knew that something had shifted. Outside, the city continued its hurried rhythm, indifferent to her thoughts, indifferent to the rain-soaked streets, and the taxis that came and went. Yet inside her, a storm had settled, soft and persistent, leaving her with the unmistakable certainty that life, even in its quiet moments, could surprise her in ways she never imagined. The morning after the rain-soaked encounter, Lena woke with a strange mix of anxiety and anticipation. The memory of Mr. Carter's words echoed in her mind, soft but persistent, like a melody she couldn't forget. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring out at the city below, where the streets glistened from last night's rain. Everything looked ordinary, but she felt anything but normal. Something inside her had shifted overnight, delicate. Unspoken tension that she couldn't shake. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. And for a fleeting moment, she hoped it was him. But it was only a message from Julia, reminding her about the morning meeting. Lena typed a brief reply, her fingers trembling slightly, and then set the phone aside. She tried to focus on her routine, showering, dressing, preparing breakfast, but every action felt mechanical. Her mind wandered back to the way he had looked at her in the rain, the softness in his eyes that had not existed before, the faint tremor in his voice that made her pulse race by the time she reached the office. The city was fully awake, buzzing with the usual chaos of honking cars, hurried pedestrians, and distant construction noises. Inside the office, life seemed unchanged. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, keyboards clicked, and the faint aroma of coffee lingered in the air. Yet Lena felt a subtle difference in the atmosphere. Or perhaps it was just her perception. She couldn't ignore the way her thoughts repeatedly drifted toward Mr. Carter, imagining his every move. Wondering if he was thinking of her too. The hours passed in a haze. Meetings blurred together, documents piled up, and emails demanded responses. Yet every glance at the office clock reminded her of last night's encounter. The memory of his voice saying something I didn't expect to feel again lingered in her mind like a riddle she wanted desperately to solve. Her heart beat faster whenever she imagined seeing him in the hallway, exchanging a glance that would mean more than words could convey. At lunchtime, she went to the small cafe across the street, hoping the change of scenery would help her think clearly. She ordered a coffee and sat by the window, watching people pass by, umbrellas bobbing like tiny, colorful mushrooms. But she couldn't focus. Instead, she pictured him walking past as if he could appear at any moment. A flicker of excitement mingled with nervousness. She tried to tell herself it was inappropriate to think about him like this, that he was her husband's boss. Yet the emotions felt real, undeniable, and strangely compelling. Her phone buzzed again, This time, it was an email notification. Ah! Subject line made her stomach twist. I can't stop thinking about that night. Can we talk? Lena's hands shook slightly as she opened it. Okay. The words were simple, but their impact was anything but. She read the email again and then again, each time feeling a mixture of fear, curiosity, and anticipation. She knew that responding would set something in motion, something she wasn't entirely ready for. But ignoring it felt impossible. She stared at the screen for what felt like hours, weighing the consequences, imagining the conversation, imagining the vulnerability she would have to show. Finally, she typed back, "Maybe it's time we do." Her finger hovered over the send button, and she hesitated. The risks were real. Misunderstandings could arise. Hearts could be broken. Yet at the same time, there was a promise of clarity, a chance to confront the emotions that had begun. To stir inside her, with a deep breath, she pressed send. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Every sound, every movement in the office seemed heightened. The faint click of a keyboard, the rustle of papers, the distant murmur of voices, all felt amplified as Lena waited for a response. Her mind replayed every moment from last night, analyzing every glance, every word. She wondered if he had reread her email, if he too felt the tension she couldn't shake by evening. When the office emptied and the city lights shimmered outside the large glass windows, her phone buzzed again. It was his reply. Simple, direct, and filled with unspoken meaning. "Let's meet tomorrow. There are things we need to discuss in person." Lena's pulse quickened. She read the message multiple times, feeling a strange mix of anticipation and fear. She left the office quickly, almost running through the rain-slicked streets, trying to process her emotions. The city felt alive in a new way, as though the buildings, the lights, and the wet streets were conspiring to reflect the turmoil inside her. That night, sleep was impossible. Lena lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail from the previous night, imagining every possible scenario for tomorrow. She wondered what he wanted to discuss. Would it be an explanation, a confession, or simply an acknowledgement of the tension that had passed between them? She didn't know, and the uncertainty both thrilled and terrified her. The next morning, Lena dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that made her feel confident without drawing unnecessary attention. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her hair in the mirror. She rehearsed what she might say, but no words seemed adequate. Part of her wanted to laugh at the absurdity of the situation. Another part wanted to hide, to avoid the confrontation entirely. Yet a quiet, insistent voice inside her told her that this was a turning point, one she could not ignore. When she arrived at the cafe where they had agreed to meet, she saw him already waiting. He stood by the window, his coat buttoned neatly, his posture slightly more relaxed than she had ever seen. He looked up as she entered, and their eyes met. The world seemed to pause for a moment, the usual cafe noise fading into the background. Her heart raced, her pulse loud in her ears, and she felt an inexplicable pull toward him. He gestured to the seat across from him. And she sat, careful not to rush, careful not to betray the whirlwind of emotions she felt inside. For a few moments, they simply looked at each other, a quiet tension filling the space between them. Finally, he spoke, his voice gentle but deliberate. "Lena, I didn't expect this to happen. But seeing you, talking to you, it reminded me of something I thought I had lost." She nodded, unsure how to respond. The words resonated in her chest, stirring emotions she had tried to suppress. She realized that she too had been thinking about that night, that fleeting moment in the rain, more than she cared to admit. The connection they had shared, brief as it was, had left an impression on both of them, one that could not be easily erased. They talked for hours, though the words never fully captured what they felt. They spoke in fragments, in pauses, in subtle glances and unspoken understanding. Every sentence carried weight, every smile held meaning. and Lena found herself drawn into a world that was both familiar and entirely new. The cafe, the rain-soaked streets outside, the distant hum of the city all became secondary to the delicate, emotional tension that bound them together by the time they left the cafe. The sun had dipped low, casting golden light over the city. Lena felt a mixture of relief and lingering anticipation. They had spoken, yes, but there was so much left unsaid, so much that hovered between them like a fragile thread. Yet, even in the uncertainty, there was a promise-on, unspoken acknowledgement that this encounter had changed something irrevocably. As they parted ways, Mr. Carter's eyes held hers for a long moment, a silent promise in the depth of his gaze. Lena walked away slowly, her steps light, but her heart heavy with emotion. She knew that tomorrow, and the days that followed, would be different. Something had begun quiet, tentative, and full of possibility. That night, lying in bed, she reflected on everything. The rain, the taxi, the cafe, the moments seemed mundane in isolation. But together they formed a tapestry of emotions she could not ignore. She realized that life was unpredictable, that human connections could appear in the most unexpected ways, and that sometimes the moments that shook you the most were also the ones that opened your heart the widest dot. And so Lena drifted into a restless sleep, her dreams filled with possibilities, with conversations yet to be had, with emotions yet to be fully understood. The story was far from over, but for the first time she felt ready to face whatever came next, knowing that something beautiful and unexpected had begun to take root in her life.